Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this new episode of International Carrières, Living and Working in, which today is dedicated to Norway, a country which is very close to Sciences Po, because as you may know, its Prime Minister, Jonas Gahr Store, graduated from Rue Saint-Guillaume in 1985. So it's a real pleasure to welcome you today. I thank our speakers for their time. They're all based in Oslo, and as you know, we will start with their introductions, and they will explain us how it is to live and to work in Norway. And the second part of the webinar, we will have a Q&A session. So please start to think about the questions that you think are important. You can either use the chat or raise your hand. And I now give the floor to Marianne Krey-Jacobsen, who graduated in 2009. Actually, we graduated same year, so good year. She's senior advisor at Storm Communications, and she's the president of the Norwegian chapter. So Marianne, maybe you will tell us about the Norwegian chapter of Sciences Po Alumni, which activities do you organize, and how you are, what are your projects for the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Camilla, and thank you so much for this opportunity to present the Norway chapter and for organizing this event on living and working in Norway. It's the first time that we have the opportunity to do this, and we're very, very grateful. I'd also like to underscore that we're lucky to have with us as one of our eminent alumni present, Marc Jumbert, who was the founder of the Norway chapter and who was the driving force behind it for well over a decade. So if we're here today, it's mostly also thanks to Marc. And the Norway chapter is, we're around 150 members. It's a good mix of recent graduates and more senior alumni. It's a quite international group, although the majority of the members are Norwegian and French. They mostly work in the private sector, although quite a few also do work in the public sector. And you mentioned our most illustrious one previously, Camilla, the Prime Minister of Norway, who graduated in 1985. And who is a very proud alumnus of Sciences Po. He talks about it as often as he can, which is very nice for us. We're also a very social group. We try to organize monthly get-togethers after work, as well as summer parties and Christmas or holiday parties. What I would underscore here today is that we've recently actually established a more structured cooperation with the alumni associations of other French grandes écoles, like HEC, SEC, and INSEAD, as well as the French Embassy and the Norwegian French Chamber of Commerce, so that we will join forces in organizing events. So please do keep an eye out on our pages, both on Sciences Po Alumni.fr and our Facebook page, which is called Sciences Po Alumni Norvège, for any events coming up. And if you're in Norway by any chance, you're most welcome to join. Thank you, Camilla. I yield the floor back to you.
Thank you, Marianne, or takk, as we say in Norwegian. Now I give the floor to Marc Jumbert, who graduated in 2005 and who is Organization and Business Development at the AF Gruppen. And as the founder of the Norwegian chapter, maybe he can also explain a bit about the history of the chapter and what brought you, Marc, to Oslo.
Thanks, Camilla. Thanks, Marianne, for the kind words. My name is Marc. I've been graduated in 2005. And found love in Sciences Po, and so love brought me to Norway, as my wife is Norwegian and our children are Norwegian and French. I've moved in 2012, so I've been here for over a decade, and I'm working as a management consultant. I've been doing this mostly in the Nordics and somewhat in Europe and the Middle East. And now I'm working, as Camilla mentioned, in an infrastructure, energy, and construction company called AF Gruppen that is, let's say, a peer of Vinci or Bouygues that you might better be acquainted with in France. So happy to be around the call and to hear from Véronique, Leo, and discuss with all of you the promises that Norway holds for each and every one of us interested in creating some value here.
Thank you, Marc. And now I'll give the floor to Véronique Revoir, who is Head of Innovation Europe at Yara International. Hello, Véronique.
Yes, thank you. And hello, everyone, wherever you are. So I'm in Oslo. I've been living in Oslo since 2002. So it's 2 decades now. It's quite a long time. Graduated from Sciences Po in 1988. So also not recently, and in specialities that were majors of political science and modern history. And like many of us probably on the call who are now in Norway, it was also love. Some of us are called love refugees to Norway. It's a nice reason to be here, and it's also a very nice country. I now work for a company called Yara International. It's got its headquarters in Norway. It's a private company, but has state funding. And we are the leader in crop nutrition, so mineral fertilizer. Right now, we're at the heart of the green transition. We have to change, and we are changing with blue and green ammonia, green fertilizers, organic fertilizers, and that's what my job is about every day. And I have the pleasure of leading a team that's very international, not based in Oslo at all over the world, and there's possibilities to work in Norway and work internationally. So that's what I do.
Thank you, Véronique. I think we will come back to this point later. And now I give the floor to Leo Robert, who works as renewable power analyst at êtes. Hello, Leo.
Thanks you, Camilla. Hello, everyone. And who is also a love refugee in Norway. I must confess that I found love with the Norwegian girl at Sciences Po, not so far from a year ago. I'm actually quite recent in Norway, since I got in Norway in February 2022. So it's not even 2 years, and graduated in 2022 as well. So works in the renewable sector, more or less renewable energy, with certificates such as green certificates or white certificates, so they're called. And so I'm very recent in terms of getting into the Norwegian system, immigration, negotiating the wage, trying to find a job, how to cope with Norwegian as a language and as a culture as well. And so happy to answer all your questions and help as many of you to come to this lovely country, which I highly recommend.
Thank you, Leo. And now I give again the floor to Marianne, who will explain us why she's in Oslo at the moment.
Well, I'm in Oslo at the moment because I'm from here. I was born and raised here. But I was living abroad for many years. After graduating Sciences Po, I joined the Norwegian Foreign Service, and I worked as a diplomat for about over a decade. I was posted to China, to Singapore, to the US, and to Italy before choosing to leave the Foreign Service 2 years ago and joining the private sector, where I now work for a PR agency called Storm Communications, where I work closely with many clients, mainly on strategy processes, but also on sustainability issues. So happy to answer any of your questions as the only Norwegian in the room.
Indeed, thank you, Marianne. Maybe I will continue on this point, since you had the opportunity to work both in a governmental environment and in the private sector. So what is the professional culture, the Norwegian professional culture in the public and in the private sector in comparison to France, for example?
Well, no, I haven't worked in France, so I don't. I wouldn't be able to make a good comparison, but I do have certain sense. I would say the work culture in Norway is pretty similar, whether you're in the public or the private sector. Though you may have at least the impression that working hours are fewer in the public sector than in the private sector. But in general, in Norway, you know, it's work-life balance, I would say, is at the center of life, and so you work to live, not really the other way around, and family is really important. So if you would, whereas in France you would perhaps not leave the office before the boss leaves. In Norway, it's very common to leave the office early to go pick up your kids in kindergarten, have an early dinner, and then keep working from home, maybe, or maybe not. But it's, I would say that the work culture is pretty flexible, and the structure also is quite flat. Actually, I would say maybe more so in the private sector than the public sector. The foreign service that I was in is a very hierarchical system, which is a bit unusual for Norway, which usually is more of a horizontal system.
Thank you, Marianne. What is your view, Marc, on the cultural professional environment?
Thanks, Camilla. I think concretely, they start earlier. So people are generally at the office before 9 and leave generally around 4-ish. At the same time, you don't have that much social time at the office. You're there to work. So what you'd have an hour break in France to mingle and discuss at lunch, here would be more around 20 minutes to 30 minutes, and people are happy to go home as effectively, as rapidly as they can. In terms of hierarchy or professional culture, I find it's more a myth from my perspective, to the extent that it might be very red depending on from company to company. But there is this exception that indeed we have a more horizontal culture here in Scandinavia. But if you ask my colleagues, they'd say that, oh, the Swedes are so very hierarchical, while the Swedes would say different things about the Danes and the Norwegians. So it might be a very a country relative, perhaps.
Thank you, Marc. And maybe Veronique could help us to distinguish the specific Norwegian professional culture, since thanks to her work, she leads a European department, and so she's meant to travel all around Europe, so she can really compare with other European countries.
Yes, indeed. I can build on what Marianne and Marc have said. The horizontal culture, definitely a lot of trust. You know, you don't need to be behind people. I mean, we are an international company, but with a Norwegian headquarter, Norwegian culture, and all our employees, wherever they are in the world, I think they have embraced a bit this Norwegian work culture. And it means that we take a lot of time to talk together. Decisions are made around a consensus as much as possible. Of course, there is a decision at the end, but it takes a lot of rounds of talking and shaping and building together, which encourages everybody in the room to have a say. I remember the first years I was here and I was leading a fully Norwegian team, and coming from France, I expected that, you know, being the leader, I would have more of a say, but that was not the case, and that was not welcomed. And definitely everybody has a say around the table, and we work together to a common decision. So that's something that's really important.
Thank you, Veronique. And Leo, what is your view, since you arrived very recently to Oslo?
Yeah, I was very shocked when I came to Norway that people are given a lot of responsibilities, especially, I mean, even youngsters like me, 26 years old, and you have lots of responsibilities. And what Veronique said is very, very true. The trust is at the very heart of the Norwegian culture as a whole, and in the working life as well. I think they give you lots of responsibilities. They trust you. They don't. It's quite different from France. I think might not be exactly the opposite, but it's very different. In France, you do a lot of what we call présentiel, when you stay in the office as long as you can to show that you're here working, even if you're not. In Norway, if the earliest you go is probably the better, and the latest you go is probably the later you go, sorry, is probably because you're not efficient or you're given too much work. And that's definitely something that was very shocking for me in coming from France. So to people who go to Norway, I give this advice: just don't try to be efficient. Efficiency is really important in Norway, I think, which is what Mark underscored as well. A very short lunch break, not that much chit chat or small talks, but rather be efficient. This is working time, and when working time is done, then we can have a beer, we can chat about our lives, wives, kids, husband, and so forth. But during work, we have to be efficient and do what needs to be done so that we're done the earliest.
Thank you, Leo. And from your specific point of view in your sector, what kind of profiles are searched, are preferred?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because in terms of education, Norway has Marianne knows this better than I do, but they have good schools. They have political science at the university. They have business schools, but they are looking for international profiles. There is a say that in Norway you won't get a job if you don't speak Norwegian, and the reason I'm an example of something that can happen even if you don't speak Norwegian. So if you speak a bit of Norwegian, or at least show some interest in Norwegian, that's a plus, I think. Marianne, Veronique, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's a plus, but it's not highly needed. Full English is, of course, needed. You need to speak English, of course, but in terms of profile, I think they are looking for very different profiles. In my sector, well, mostly economics background, I would say, engineering as well, but as for Sciences Po, in my sector, I would really look into people who are into the international energy, masters in international energy. I attended the economics and public policy one in the School of Public Affairs, but as long as you can show that you are flexible and that you have some interest into Norway, into the sector, then it's as for every other job, I would say. But masters are needed, of course.
Thank you, Leo. Mark, what is or Marianne?
Maybe my take on this rapidly, Camilla, is there's room for all profiles. There is a strong premium on the French educational system, and Sciences Po, amongst other schools, is well renowned for ability to deliver professionals with a structured mindset and a way to question practices. So in the management consulting industry, there are examples of numerous internationals who make it here. In terms of language, I think what Leo said is essential. Is if you don't speak the language, it's a huge value add to show interest. Just show interest and give the impression that you're on a path to integration. That's something that for internationals can be an uncertainty factor at recruitment stage. Is the lack of interest in staying. So showing that interest for the country is a prominent factor.
Thank you, Mark. Marianne?
Yeah, I think when it comes to language and the sort of work opportunities for foreigners in Norway, I think, first of all, I think there's been developments in the recent years, and I think Veronique can confirm that, who's been in the Norwegian labor market for 2 decades. So I think there's more open-mindedness now. I think it also is very sector dependent, and I think it depends whether you're talking to a global company based in Norway or a more Norwegian-oriented company, because the global companies will be much more prone to looking at profiles that are international, whereas more sort of Norwegian-centric companies, I think, are still a bit skeptical. It's not only the language, it's sort of you know what you know and you know who you know, and it's a network thing. So I think in Norway there is a clear division between the more global, large companies, and the companies that are internationally oriented, and the companies that are more Norway-centric.
Thank you, Marianne. I give the floor to Veronique, and then I see a question from Catherine, who knows the Norwegian professional culture very well.
No, I can fully confirm what Marianne just said. It took me a while to get in, and I spoke very good English, but Norwegian needed to be there. And in some professions, it's kind of hard to get to that level, right? Because you need not only to speak, but you need to write, and then it becomes really, really hard. So I think showing the willingness, there's always worry around, are you here to stay, or are you just passing? You know, and if you're passing, then are they willing to invest in you? Because employers, at least the ones that I've had in Norway, have always invested in me as a resource in giving me training. Even now, I'm closer to retirement than to the start, but I get training all the time. So it's really a resource element that you need to really reassure that even if you're not speaking Norwegian right now, you're taking classes, you're willing to take classes, and you're show that you're rather interested in staying. Also because the country, I mean, I think we've painted right now a very beautiful view of the nice work culture, but you know, even living in Oslo, the winters are long. It's not always easy. There's a lot of things that are happening indoors and outdoors, but indoors it means that we need to get into the Norwegian networks. You know, the integration takes time. So foreigners will sometimes be seen as, are you going to stay or are you just passing? I don't know if it's like that in all countries, but it's definitely like that here. That is a question of country.
Thank you, Veronique. I now give the floor to Catherine Artok, who is one of the Sciences Po Alumni board members, and she spent a few years in Norway, so she can also explain her experience.
Thank you. Yes, brief word of self-introduction. Yes, I'm a board member of Sciences Po Alumni, former general secretary of the association, and I came back from Norway 10 years ago. That's a bit of time, and I used to be public affairs and communication director for continental Europe in Statkraft, and I know Norway quite well, and I would just like to say that for those who are going to leave Norway one day to pursue their career in whatever continental Europe, you will come back with a treasury, with a high value capital from Norway. That is on my opinion, that is the management culture. It's very different from the culture you can get in the art of management in Germany or in France, for example, or even in Great Britain. And it's based on a mix of trust and, as I think Marc said, efficiency. And it functions very well. I used to experiment it. And when I came back, first in Germany and then in France, it was highly appreciated from my colleagues, from my hierarchy, and it's very specific, I think. I don't know how it goes really in Sweden. I used to work with Sweden or Denmark, but I think there's a Norwegian specificity in management, and it's a capital for all of us. And just
Oui, je te
I don't think what you think about it, all of you. I think that's a very important point.
Thank you, Catherine, for this for sharing your personal view. So I think that this is very important what you said about the treasury that Norwegian experience has offered to you, and maybe to the people that wish to join you in Oslo. If there are no questions, maybe I will ask you a question about life, because our webinar is about career, but also life. And as Marianne said, in Norway, people work to live well. So, what about work-life balance, but especially the cost of living? So I think this point is very useful for people that project themselves to move to Norway. Maybe could you please tell us about the cost of living, salaries, and this kind of useful information? We can start from Marc and then.
Thanks, Camilla. It's hard to remember the cost of living these days, but I say Norway is not that expensive if you take out restaurants, alcohol, and some goods that are heavily taxed. Otherwise, general price of living you can manage, and as noting that the remuneration is often in line with the cost of living. If you have a local employer, it's the remuneration is Norway starts pretty high, and the tax system is adapted to that. That's my personal reminiscence around that. But maybe Véronique, Leo, or Marianne, you'd have other insights.
I think I'd like to hear Leo's point of view on this, since he's the most recent arrival to Norway.
No, I can relate to what Marc just said. Yeah, alcohol restaurants, you don't do that often, but otherwise everything's pretty manageable, I think. I've never heard of anyone underpaid in Norway. It rarely happens. While in France, you don't usually get the salary for the salary you could expect for, I don't know, your education or the type of job you do or the amount of hours. I think it's pretty manageable in Norway. House and flats for renting is roughly the same price as in Paris, I would say. For a studio, you would pay like €1,000, something like this, 900,000 euros. But to bear in mind that in Norway, it's not the euro system; it's the Norwegian crowns. So you have to divide it by 11.5 at the time, but then it evolves, right, as the market moves. So I would say, yeah, the house housing is okay. And then for the goods, when you go to grocery and so forth and activities, it really depends, as Marc said. Some things are heavily taxed, like alcohol, which is on a monopoly in Norway by the government, by the state. So it's a bit different. But then I think everything is roughly manageable if you have a local employer, of course. I don't know about living in Norway while working for a French company that is in France, for example. But if your employer is based in Norway and that you're paid in kroner, in Norwegian krone, the local currency, then I think it's pretty manageable. We'll talk numbers after, but I think it's okay. At least with a master's and working as having a decent job, I would say. But even Marianne can correct me on this, but even the low-skilled workers, let's say those who work in groceries and so forth, they are not underpaid. They get a decent salary, I think.
Yeah, I think salary levels are, as Marc said as well, entry levels are relatively high, no matter what sort of job you do. Of course, there's limitations to that too. It's not always true, and there there is a certain level of poverty in Norway as well, which we tend to forget. But what's interesting for this audience is also that the difference between management pay and employee pay is not so big unless you work in very, very big companies, where the management pay is high, but it's high on a Norwegian scale, not on a global scale. So pay is generally pretty fair, and there are yearly review processes that are relatively transparent in most companies, and definitely in the public sector.
Thank you. And maybe Veronique, would you like to add a comment on this?
No, totally confirm. I mean, if you're going to get an offer from a local contract, it will be according to a grid that's been negotiated as part of a union agreement, at least for big companies, and small companies, it's like the branch agreement. So, you know, you can trust that what you get is a fair deal. After that, there are also a lot of social benefits that come. So school is free, kindergarten, you pay a little bit, but it's, you know, heavily subsidized. University is free. You know, there's lots of social benefits around the health system also. So you're not going to a country where you're going to have to take this private insurance or pay that private. So on the one side, you do pay maybe a lot for certain things, but you can get by. I don't think it will be an issue. And what I did as the first month, I counted everything. I literally counted everything, and then I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to stop counting for certain things that matter to me, and for the other ones, I'll work it out. I'll save, right? So it's but the salaries follow in general.
Thank you, Veronique. Maybe a question about internships. Are well paid in comparison to France?
Oh yes. It's I mean, at least in my company, it's very different, and we're a company of 40 people, so I cannot imagine in Statkraft or in Storm Communications or in management consulting or in Yara. But at least in my company, I think we pay them more than 1,000 euros per month net after taxes, everything. While in France, you can be from Sciences Po and get 600 euros at the Ministry of Economics, like I did 2 years ago. So it's very different. I'm not sure there is a minimum salary nor a maximum for internships, but usually they consider you as an employer, and as an employee, sorry. And like Veronique said, they invest in you as well. If you do an internship with them within a Norwegian company, they don't expect you to stay, right? But they invest in their time. They take it very seriously, right? You're not just a piece because we need to fill some desk, right? So it's really, they give you lots of responsibilities, and that is reflected in the salary as well.
Totally confirm. I mean, we it's called internship, but it's a short-term contract. Okay?
Yes.
So we take summer interns at Yara every year, and the one that was with us now in June, July, he's actually stayed on part-time, 50% on an assignment. So we do invest heavily. It's paid. It's like a short-term contract. It's not a stage, as you would call it in France, where you might not be really paid. So it's a completely different setting. However, you know, our internships, they're in Oslo, so you need to be able to find yourself an accommodation, which can be a challenge right now. Fine, you know, live with the amount of money that you get from that salary.
Thank you very much. I'm reading, we already have a few questions. A general one, what's the best approach to find a job in Norway? For example, through LinkedIn, does it work in your opinion?
Camilla, I tried to draft a written reply to that one. I'd say really a strong recommendation to always get in touch personally with people. Nobody has a job, just so you know, nobody has a job. So don't ask for a job but ask for experience sharing. Everybody's happy to share 15 minutes of their time with a student or someone from the upcoming generation, just to stay in tune with our society and to share what they've learned in the last decades. So I think just to find people you find interesting, send a nice mail letting them know about what you're looking for, what's your profile, and if they have time, they'll find it. And you'll see that this first conversation might open the door to other conversation. At least that's how I found a job. I asked for experience sharing, and the person replied, I don't have experience to share, but I might have a job. And so that's how it started. So you might be surprised.
Thank you, Marc. And I think there is a connected question about how to connect with French people in Norway. So maybe with the alumni chapter, but other alumni association, maybe you can give some suggestions or advice.
Well, just to toot our own horn here, I mean, sign up to the Sciences Po Alumni Norvège and come to our events. That's a good place to start. But other than that, you know, there's the French Norwegian Chamber of Commerce could be a good channel. The French Institute organizes events, cultural events on a regular basis where you can just go and mingle with people. So there are several different channels, but maybe Véronique, Léo, Marc, you have other channels and experiences.
I might ask Leo, since he's the youngest among the speakers, and who graduated just 1 year ago in 2022, and you moved to Oslo for love, as you said, but so you found your job directly in Norway or from France?
Well, technically in between. I found a job offer on LinkedIn, and I applied very basically. And on my first day in Oslo, I got an interview 2 hours after landing at the airport, and I got the job. So I got very lucky, because the job market in Norway can be tight. It really depends on the sector, right? But coming back on the question of how do you find people, or how do you find connections, French connections or not? Well, Marc and I are a good example, because I sent him a LinkedIn message to get some of his experience, right? Just as my first thought was to go on Sciences Po Alumni and then see who was based in Oslo or in Norway, and then just contact them directly to get some insights from someone who attended the same school as I, and then from one move to another, and then you land here and to Sciences Po Alumni. Marc also wrote back on the Facebook group called Les Français en Norvège. That is a very good group where you can have some trash talk and some very important information as well on how to get along and to meet other French people. And there are always some events that occur in Oslo. And there is a big French community, I think, in Oslo, around 6,000 people, something like this, or between 5 and 6K people. So it's quite global. And especially if you go to some of the neighborhoods, you will hear people speaking French, especially in Frogner, on the west side of Oslo, because of the French high school and schools. And there you can familiarize yourself with French people, but they're not hard to find.
And there are many Norwegians who do speak French, so there's quite a Francophile and who are eager because they've learned French and they've gone to exchanges to France, who are eager to practice. So speaking French in Oslo is not impossible.
And maybe, Véronique, from your point of view, since you spent 20 years in Oslo, have you noticed a change, or has Oslo become more international? Or
Massive. I mean, not only the city, the offer that you have in terms of restaurants, cultural life, much more multicultural. There's when I arrived in Norway, it was rare to hear a foreign language on the streets, and then all of a sudden you started hearing a lot of Spanish, a lot of Greek, a lot of I mean, it's not London, let's not kid ourselves. You hear more more Swedish and Polish and Lithuanian than any, in terms of foreign language, than French. But it's changed a lot, and there's a whole new investment that the Norwegian government and the city of Oslo have done in terms of culture, in terms of the new museums that have reopened in a different part of town. Lots of things happening. One thing that we didn't mention is how close to nature everything in Norway is. And I think if you like nature, if you're a kind of outdoors person, this is the country for you, because it's right there. And that doesn't cost a penny. Maybe just the cost of taking your car, or right now, given that the car electricity is so low, you're actually being paid for, to use the car. So the bus ticket or subway ticket will take you to ski slopes, or will take you to the forest just to walk, hike, pick mushrooms, whatever you want to do. So it's a city that and a country that has changed a lot and opened a lot more to foreigners, and it's possible to live a very international life in Oslo with a Norwegian twist. Sorry, I have to say.
Thank you, Veronique. I think there is a question more for Marianne regarding the marketing and communication industry. How hard is for recent graduate students to find a job in this particular sector?
Yeah, I saw that question from Luci, and I would say that it depends what you're targeting, because for PR agencies you will need to speak Norwegian, and if you don't, then I would say it's a no-go. But the big companies, especially the global ones, I'm sure Veronique could confirm this for Yara, but also many of the others like Equinor, like DNV, they often have needs in their marketing and communications departments, also for non-Norwegian speakers, and often internships open up there. So and many, I think a good time to do this is over the summer, when there's to start sort of with a summer internship, and that's often a good way to go in, or covering for maternity leave. Is often a good way in as well, where you sort of get a foothold in the company, and then get offered an opportunity later. But I would definitely target the larger, more international companies with Norwegian HQs.
And if I may add, it will be easier, because that's how I got in. It will be easier for marketing than for communications, because communications, they will tend to require that you speak Norwegian, because there is a large part of the communication that we do which is related to the Norwegian press. So then they will sort of put more emphasis on Norwegian skills, but marketing is easier in an international Norwegian-based company.
Well, now let's move to another sector. I see a question about the oil and gas industry. Do you have any suggestions on this particular sector, which is very important in the Norwegian environment?
Perhaps some insights here. We don't call it the oil and gas industry anymore. We call it the energy transition sector. More seriously, you have a lot of Sciences Po working in that area. One of the alumni is actually head of employer branding for Equinor, and so I'd suggest our alumni to just reach out to her directly on that item. And maybe Leo, you'd have insights too on the energy side, because there's a lot of
I mean, I dedicated myself to renewables, and as far as I'm concerned, oil is not considered renewable, but perhaps Norwegian lobbying has changed things, because for people who don't know, Norway has lots of oil and gas, of course. No, I don't have much more to add than what Mark said. Probably reach out to this alumni that is directly in the sector. I can help renewables with my very short experience so far. But with oil and gas, yeah, I'd recommend getting in touch with that person.
And at one point, the jobs there are likely not to be in Oslo or less in Oslo. Let's say it's more the West Coast, so it's a different part of the country, which is nice also, but has also some challenges. I was speaking to a Norwegian student yesterday, and he's in Bergen, and it can be very rainy. So it's another part of the country. But Bergen, Stavanger, Trondheim, we have French communities there, and they work even more than us in Oslo in those sectors.
Thank you, Veronique. And by the way, I saw that you have posted the website of your company, Yara International, because they frequently search for interns. So if you're interested in this sector, do not hesitate to visit the website. And I saw another question. Maybe I will repeat it because the reply was in the chat, but maybe it's useful for the entire audience. How practically to find a location in Oslo? Is it difficult in terms of guarantees, or in terms of how practically it works for a foreigner to find an accommodation in Oslo? Or if there are any websites that you recommend to?
There is one website that one should visit. Yes, Veronique, you know it. There is one website that all Norwegians visit, sometimes several times a day. It's the Le Bon Coin of Norway. It's called Finn, FINN.no. And it's basically the Google of everything. You can find the chairs for your garden, as well as a job and an accommodation for long or short term. It's a must. You must download Finn or go to fin.no. And I see Marianne is nodding, so that's good. I'm not a very good example because I came with a Norwegian girlfriend, so it was a lot easier to find accommodation just for the speaking, at least, even though all Norwegians speak English. But I think on fin.no you will find a good accommodations, as well on Hybel, which you spell HYBEL. I will write down in the chat for medium term accommodation, 1 to 7, 8 months. People renting out like Airbnb, but for medium term rents, and that works pretty well. It's all digitalized and very, very, very good. Yeah, thank you, Veronique.
You do have to be careful because regularly French people or foreigners who are not in Norway will run into scams, thinking that Finn or Uber will give them the answer. But so it's rare, but it does happen. So it's not like everything is pink and rosy and there's no, people who try to trick you here. But in general, that's the way in Finn or Uber will get you.
Yeah, and just to add something on, as for any other countries, it's probably better if you ask the landlord, or if you fill in an application to get an accommodation with having the contract already. As for France, as for Spain, probably Italy or any other country. If you say I have an internship for the next 6 months, this is how much I'm getting, and this is why I need this accommodation because X, Y, Z, and you present your plan, I think it will be stronger.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on? I see another question from Luqi Liu. Is it a common path to enter as an intern and move to full-time, or is it also common to just find a full-time position as a recent graduate? Is it possible to skip the internship level?
Both. I think I entered directly as a full-time employee, but then I had the chance to hire 2 students as interns, a Norwegian and a Greek. One of them followed her studies, and the other stayed as a full-time employee now. So it's totally feasible, both of them. But I think the internship is a very good entry. If you freak out of not liking the company, or if you just want to give it a try, I think it's definitely worth a shot, especially with what Veronique said before, that students and interns are not really interns. They are full-time employees. They just have a determined contract of 6 months or 4 or 8. Norwegians are used to work since very, very young, and then therefore used to get paid since they are very young. So you will get a good internship and get paid, and potentially, if there's a spot, if you make them happy about your job, then they can potentially offer you something more long term.
Well, I think there is also a question of your status, because if you have already graduated, can you apply for the internship? Because in France, for instance, you need to have the student status while you are an intern, but maybe Norway is different.
No.
Yeah, you don't need it, Veronique.
No, I mean, we take on the basis of whether you're third year or fourth year, and that means either you've, some have graduated. It's yeah, so it's not, we don't need convention de stage because it's a short-term contract. So there's not this whole setup around the stage as you have in France. Just get a contract.
More flexible, I would say, easier. So another maybe question, as we are approaching the end of our webinar, how does it work? You still have one foot in France and the other in Norway, working for a French company, for instance, at the beginning, from Léa. Donc, Léa, you can add or speak if you prefer.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. The question is, my boyfriend will come to Norway with me next year, and for the moment he has a job and thinking of continuing his job at the beginning perhaps, and then find a job in Norway. But he wanted to know how it works in Norway, if we can stay here and working for a French company, and if there is something to know about this.
A couple of rules, Léa. First one will be tax. He needs to check which country he's spending more of 6 months of his time. Another item is a recent change in the Norwegian law that allows people working in Norway to work from abroad and still be in the social security system, but that would need him to be registered in the system initially. And so then it will be for the French employer, how would working remote work with social security. So a number of items, but people do it and have been doing this sometimes. So just need to perhaps even ask the question on la communauté française en Norvège or the like.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Marianne.
No, I was just going to say, of course, it depends whether the person in question is a French or European national or not, because the instant you are from outside of the European Economic Area, things become much more complicated in terms of you need a visa, you need permit of stay. It can take very long because the bureaucracy linked to the immigration authorities is pretty heavy and slow. So yeah, I would look carefully into that if that's the case for any of you.
Another thing I wanted to mention is about this 6 months. So actually, if you are to, how they count is that if you're landing in Oslo at 11 p.m. at night, that's 1 day in a Norwegian counting of the days, or I don't know if it's Norwegian counting or if it's a European rule, but it counts as a day. And as a result, I have colleagues who have been, coming heavily to Oslo for projects and all of a sudden found themselves taxed in Norway for incomes they were receiving in another country. So it goes quite fast, more faster than you think. And I would say the Norwegian tax authorities have always proven to be a very nice and they have a very good answering service. So I would just send them an email and say, this is my situation. What do you recommend? What do I need to do?
Thank you very much. I may have a question about remote working, since we haven't really talked about it, and in most European countries, and actually almost everywhere, remote working is a more frequent habit. How does it work in Norway?
Sorry.
No, you can go, Veronique, if you want.
By remote, you mean home office, or what do you mean? Yeah, extremely flexible. I've had home office since 20 years. Actually joined the company and then realized there was no fixed telephone. Everybody had a mobile phone, and you were, you were wherever, right? So remote inside of Norway, no problem. A remote with a Norwegian contract, but working in another country, then the company has certain rules, and in our company it's no more than 2 weeks a year, apart from business travel.
Thank you, Veronique. Any other comments? We still have a few minutes. If there is a last question, or if you want to have a last comment. Well, are you all happy in Oslo? I can see Veronique for more than 20 years, and Marc for more than 10, and well, Marianne, you're Norwegian, so it's
yes, but trying to not think of the fact that winter is coming right now. The climate can be tough, but you have to find ways to work around it, and go skiing and go get a fireplace, that sort of thing.
Ila, I'll be attending the Canada session, so we hear about their winters. I think ours are really mild compared to theirs, so it will be good.
They're mild in temperatures, but they're tougher than Canada in darkness. So, I think the darkness is a factor that you don't think about when you come here, but then you experience it, and you, like Marianne says, there's ways to cope with it. All kinds.
Great. So thank you very much for being here, for your experience sharing, and for the audience, I really recommend you to follow our series Living and Working in. I put the link on the chat. You can find all the countries in which we already have had a webinar. And we plan other sessions in India, Central Europe, and all around the world. So follow us on Po Alumni, and follow the Norwegian chapter to receive some suggestions, to meet nice people, and to attend great events. Thank you very much, and hei då, as we say in Norwegian.
Ha det bra.
Ha det.
Thank you, Camilla, for organizing. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.